Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the online faculty training session. I'm Question Suh, a professor of economics in the College of Business and Information Science. I'm going to show you how to create a test and question pools in Blackboard on this training session. I created two YouTube video clips using artificial intelligence voice recognition tools. I advise you not to be surprised when AI voice will shift from one clip to another. Here is the first video clip.
This tutorial here, we're going to show you how to create a test in Blackboard. So first thing I want you to do is once you get logged into your course, I'd like you to go up and mouse over assessments, and here you'll see test. Test is a common word here for quiz, exam, or test. So if you're creating one of the three, you'll want to click on test. When you click on test, it's basically ask you to name the test. So you're going to click on create new test and so forth. So this is one way of actually creating a test. The thing about creating a test here is that you're actually in your weekly assignment, and if you're in a weekly folder and you create a test, you're going to have to go through the whole creation process, which means you're going to have to create the quiz and then set its options to show the day that it's going to be presented. You might set a password, you might tell it how many points, things like that. But anyway, this is one place to actually create a test. This is not where I go to create a test in Blackboard because, again, this is going to make me deploy the test in the appropriate week that I'm in, and sometimes I'm not ready to deploy a test. I just want to get it started. I may not complete the quiz. I might get 5 or 6 questions in and then come back an hour later and do 5 or 6 more questions, however. So anyway, on the left side of the screen, scroll down until you get to Course Tools. If you scroll down a little bit more, we're going to go down to Test, Surveys, and Pools. Here I can click on Tests. This is where I can actually now create a test that will not be deployed out to the students. It's just here waiting for me to deploy it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Build Test. The test name here, we're going to call this Chapter 1 Quiz. And when you create a quiz or a test or an exam, you want to be sure to give enough information about the quiz to satisfy the student's curiosity here. So this is going to be a 20-question test. Here you're going to see multiple choice, true, false, and fill in the blank. Okay, so anyway, that's enough to get us started here. We can always come back and edit this. So once you get this information filled in, you're actually done. So if you scroll down, you'll see that there's nothing else to actually provide. So let's hit submit. Once you hit submit, you're now at the screen where you can actually create questions. If you have a test bank from your textbook, you can click on reuse question and click on find questions. And this is if you want to choose individual questions. If you want to create a test based on a pool, so if you have a pool that has like 50 questions in it, and you want to give a quiz based on 10 questions of the 50, then we can choose create random block. That is creating a quiz from a pool. So if you have 50 questions and you have 10 questions on the exam, it's possible that 5 students could have 10 different questions. So this is a good way to combat cheating and a good way to set up a good rounded out quiz. All right, so now what we need to do is click on Create Quiz and come down and choose the type of question that you're wanting to use. So let's do a fill in the blank. When it comes to the question title, you don't need to fill that in. So I'm just going to click on the question text here, and what I'm going to do is just put 10 or so lines underneath, and I'm going to put known facts that can be recorded and that have implicit meaning. Okay, so once you get your question typed in, you're going to scroll down the screen, and here you'll see your answers. And for the answer here, I'm going to put in data. I'm not going to make it case sensitive. I'm just wanting data, whether they put a capital D, they put it in all caps, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it's case sensitive or not. So it's going to need to be an exact match. It's got to say data. This is the only word we're looking at, which goes along with the content in chapter 1. So if we come down, we can scroll down and hit submit. And here you can see your first question. So we're going to come up and add another question, and I'm going to do another fill in the blank. Again, I don't need a question title. I'm just going to go ahead and put my question in. What does DBMS stand for? And again, it's going to be a fill in the blanks, so we're going to need to have database management system. There's our correct answer. Again, I don't have to do anything except go down to the bottom and hit submit. Now, your goal here is to go through and create 20 questions based off of some questions you might have out of the chapter, the back of the chapters. You may have some questions of your own that don't come from the textbook, which is okay. Feel free to make up any test questions that you'd like, as long as it fits the material and meets our learning objectives for the course. So anyway, this is a good way to, my favorite way to create a test is just by going to Test Surveys and Pools under Course Tools. So again, what I want to do is go down to the bottom, just click OK. I'm not going to worry about doing the total 20 questions. And you can see here, I now have a Chapter 1 quiz. And it's also not deployed. So, and again, you can come through and create all your chapter quizzes here. You don't have to deploy them out to the students, but what we do now is if we're ready to deploy this test out to the students, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the appropriate week, and again, I'm going to go week 2, and I'm going to build an assessment. I'm going to build a test. You'll know that Chapter 1 quiz is in the list, so all I got to do is click on it. We've already made it. So right now, we're worried about the deployment phase of this. So I'm going to click Submit. Now here is where I can come in. I got 20 questions, and I want to allow multiple attempts. I do, and I'm going to use the highest result for the last grade. I'm going to make them completed in one setting. They can't stop and come back. I'm not using any display or display after display until tool here because I just want it to be available to the students once it pops up. Make it available. Yes, we'll make this available to the students. So you can see if you just come to the top of this here and come down, you should be able to do everything okay. So I'm going to go to the bottom and all at once. So I'm going to deliver all the questions all at once. You could deliver them one at a time. Now, I don't do prohibit backtracking because some students may go to the next question thinking that they're going to come back, and if they're not explicitly told that backtracking is prohibited, you'll notice that some students will get mad and they'll probably want to end up retaking the test because of that. So anyway, I just don't do prohibit backtracking. And then randomized questions. If you're in a classroom where you've got 20 students sitting close together, you may want to deploy the random questions tool here so that no student sees the same question at the same time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And let me go ahead and cover one more thing. I'd like to go back, and you can see down here, now Chapter 1 quiz is deployed. If I click on it, I can begin the test. And this is what the test would look like to the students. So I'm going to go back over here to Test Surveys and Pools. I'm going to leave this page because I'm actually leaving a quiz. I'm going to go to Tests. I'm going to edit the Chapter 1 quiz. And there's some things that I missed here. So for example, if you're going to have 20 questions and you want them to be worth 5 points each, so you notice here these are worth 10. So right here, just do a select all, make this worth 5 points, and do an update, and you'll notice that over here, all of these will change to 5 points. So once you get all your questions in, then go to the points value, and you want to try to get this to equal 100. So it doesn't have to be 100, but again, we want to try to get our test to be in good even numbers that students can swallow pretty easy. So, but anyway, you can see here, I can choose select all, and then I can change the point value of each question, and click update, and it will update all of the questions over here. And when you're done, just click OK. And that is it. So if you have any questions, please give me a call. I'll be glad to walk this through with you. Also, if you have join.me or GoToMeeting, which is a screen sharing tool, we can use that to share screens, and I can see what you're doing, and we can walk it through that way. So before you do call and you want to do a screen share, make sure you have all of that set up and running. And anyway, this is the end of the tutorial. Thank you.
Now we move on to the second part of the video clip. Part 2 covers developing question pools in Blackboard. After the video presentation, I take your questions.
In this video, we're going to look at how to build a test in Blackboard using Blackboard's test creation tools. Rather than simply build a test, we're going to show you how you can use question pools and random blocks of questions to make it more difficult for students to cheat through collaboration and answer sharing. To get started creating a test using question pools, open the Course Tools header, then choose Test Surveys and Pools. If you plan to create, say, a 45 question test using only 45 questions, you could go straight to Tests and then click Build Test and start adding questions. But we want to create a 45 question test that pulls questions randomly from a pool of 75 questions. This will result in each student getting essentially a different test, different questions in a different order. So instead, on the Test Surveys and Pools page, we'll start out by clicking Pools. Creating tests this way often raises concerns about the validity and fairness of the test. If questions are being pulled from a pool, how can we be sure each student is being tested on all the objectives? Particularly when a pool is large relative to the number of questions. Well, the best way to do this is to create multiple question pools. For this example, we're creating a test for Module 1. Module 1 has 3 objectives, so we want 2 question pools for each objective. One consisting of questions that test for basic understanding, which I've labeled competent, and one that tests for deeper understanding, which I've labeled proficient. Depending on the particulars of your test, you may want to break your questions up into fewer or more pools, but hopefully this example gives you an idea of how you can use multiple pools to improve validity while using randomization. So let's look at how to create a pool. First we click Build Pool. And then we enter a name for our pool, and if we'd like a description. Then we click Submit. Before we start adding questions, let's look at the question settings. Here we can set a number of defaults for what appears on the question page. For example, if we want to include feedback for each individual answer option, we can check this box here. Or if not, we can leave this unchecked. The same goes for images, files, and web links. If we want to add an image, a file, or a web link to each individual answer option, we can do that here. Or if we want to include that for feedback, we can add that here. Similarly, if we want to include or not include metadata, we can have this box checked. If we want to set a default point value for questions, we can enter that here and check this box. Say it was 2. And then we can change some display options here. So we'll leave this at sort of the default settings. And now let's look at creating a question. Just point to Create Question, and you see there's a number of question types available. We're not going to go into every single type that's on this list. Instead, let's focus on the multiple choice question type, which is one of the most commonly used, just to look at some of the things that are most common about how the question setup works. you'll notice there's a space for question title. This is sort of a short reference point for each question. You can have a title. It's not required. You notice on the pool page, once we set things up, the full question doesn't appear by default. So if you put in a good question title, you can identify what the question is without having to see the full question text. Then next is the space for the question text, where you put in the prompt. And then under options, the options are going to vary depending on the type of question you're doing. For multiple choice, I have the option to change the answer numbering style if I want no numbering style, which is the default, or numbers, Roman numerals, uppercase or lowercase letters. Do I want the answers to appear vertically or horizontally? Do I want to allow partial credit? And if I do allow partial credit, I can also say negative scores for incorrect answers. And then the last option, do I want to randomize the answer options? The next space is for the answers. You notice that the default number of answers is 4, but I can add more answer options up to 100 just by changing the number here. If I want to have less than 4 answer options, I just scroll over to the side on one of the answer options and click remove, and that will delete it from the list. Next, there's a column for the correct answer. I just select the radio button for the answer that is correct, and then enter your answer option text in the answer space. And then if I've selected to allow for partial credit, I can enter a partial credit value where appropriate in the partial credit percentage space. If I put a negative value there, then that would make a negative score for that incorrect answer. At the bottom here, we have a space for correct response feedback, or incorrect response feedback and incorrect response feedback. Both are optional. And then at the bottom, the metadata for the question. Do I want to add category, topic, level of difficulty, keywords? I can just click add and type in a term, and that will apply the keyword to this question. That can be useful for pulling in questions from a pool of questions of a particular type into a test or another pool. I can search by keyword, level of difficulty, topic, or category. The last space is for instructor notes. That can be helpful if you are sharing your test with other folks and you want to provide some background information on the question. When you're done, you can either click submit and create another to create another question of this type, or just click submit and add this question and then perhaps add a question of another type. So here, through the magic of editing, we have all of our questions added. A few things about this pool canvas page. If I click the options button next to the pool name, I can edit the name of the pool or the description of the pool. And also, as I had mentioned, you by default only see a brief preview of the question text. If you want to see the full question text, just point to question display and choose full text. If you want to see the question and the answer options, click the little pop-out window button, and that'll show you the full question details. A last option here that's kind of neat is if you want to delete individual, you can check the boxes and hit delete. If you want to set a point value, a default point value for questions, check the boxes and then put in a point value here and hit update. And that'll apply that point value to all the questions. It's not important to have a point value on questions in a pool when we're going to be pulling those questions in at random, though. You'll see that when we create the test, that works a little differently. So now I've got our pool all set up. We will go back out to the pools page. Just one item here, if you want to edit any of these pools, just click the options button next to the pool and choose edit, and that'll get you back to the pool canvas page. Now let's create the test. Back at the test surveys and pools page, we'll click test and then build test. Enter a name for your test in the namespace, and then there's a space for description. The description is text that appears before the student clicks on the link to launch the test so they can see it before they get started, and then the instruction space appears after the test has been opened, so it'll be only visible once they're in the process of taking the test. Click Submit. And now you see this page looks a lot like the pool canvas page. I could add individual questions to the test, which is helpful for if you have a test where you're pulling in questions randomly, but you want to make sure every student gets these 5 questions. You can use create a question here and add those 5 questions individually, either before you add in your pools or as you're adding in your pools. You also have a question settings space, which is the same settings as we saw in our pool. Now, to add a random block of questions, what we want to do is point to reuse question. And then you see we have 3 options here. We can create a set of questions, which would be a fixed number of questions from a pool that would go onto this test, or an individual question with find questions. But we're going to do random block. So here we select which pool we want to pull from, and then which type of question we want to pull. Our pools just have multiple choice questions. We'll say all pool questions here because that's handy, but it is possible to say have a pool that has multiple choice questions and then true false questions, and then reach into this pool and pull 5 of the multiple choice questions, and then reach into this pool again later and pull 5 of the true false questions. Again, for this we're just going to do all pool questions and then click Submit. You see this adds a random block of questions to our test page, and now I want to change the number of questions. I want 10 questions from this pool, so I'll just change questions to display in the block to 10. Click Submit. And now the default point value here is 10, and I don't want 10. I want 1 point per question for this pool, so I'll say update points 1. And now you see the total points here is 10, and the total questions is 10. And I can just, to create another block, I just click Create Random Block. And here I'll pull from my next block. And then how many questions do I want? In this case, I want 5. And now because we are we've split up the competent questions and the proficient questions, I can actually make the proficient questions worth more points. Say 2 points per question for these and 1 point for the competent questions. You can also add a question block by, when you mouse over, you notice this Add Question button pops up. I can click here and then choose Create Random Block, and then delve into the third pool here. And again, we'll do 10 and 1 and so on. So now, again, through the magic of editing, I've got all of my pools added. You see I've got a total 45 questions, 60 points for this test. One of the things to note about this question setup as it stands right now is that the questions are going to be clumped together on the test. All of the Module 1 Objective 1 competent questions are going to be clustered together, all 10 of those, and then there's going to be a cluster of 5 more difficult Objective 1 questions, and then a cluster of Objective 2 competent questions, and so on. That's something that we'll actually be able to shuffle up when we post the test, and we'll look at how to do that in the next video on publishing your tests. I hope you found this video informative. If you have any questions, please don't